Hambini fans, and welcome to another episode of Hambini Reams. Today, to kind of explore the markets a little bit more than normal, we have something that's quite unusual for the show. We've got a mountain bike, and it is no ordinary mountain bike. It is from a brand called Cotic. I was going to say colostomy bag, but never mind. This is a brand that is, and it says on the bottom, designed in Sheffield, the steel city of Sheffield, England no less, manufactured in Taiwan. Now the last time we had something like that was the Bowman, and it did not end well at all. To give you a bit of context, this frame was sent in by one of my viewers. He has a number of Hambini bottom brackets, and this will be the first one for his mountain bike. Now he sent it in on the premise that he needed something to interface his 30mm, yes, 30mm rotor crankset into a BSA bottom bracket. Now, in engineering terms, that is not ideal, and I will show you why later on. But it is something that is becoming more prevalent, so I have to engineer for it. Let's talk about this frame. This is the non-drive side of the bottom bracket. Whoever has done this frame really has done the post-welding process really well. That has been faced. That's been chased. The alignment between both sides is very, very good. This is the drive side, and you can see one of these mounts. The last time I saw one of these is on the Kingdom Vendetta, where that video was banned because some fanny didn't like it. This is the drive side seat stay. This has been reinforced, and then it collapses around here to incorporate space for the chain rings. Bottom of the bottom bracket, and this is where the two chain stays go in. The welding around here is very neat. Now this frame is steel, so it is extremely heavy, but nonetheless it is very neat the way it's been welded. This is the intersection between the seat stay and the chain stay on the non-drive side. This is where the brake caliper mounts to. I think these are called post mount brake calipers found on mountain bikes. Some thought's been gone into here because that has been reinforced. So normally under braking loads, and I guess on a mountain bike you would experience them, you can get localized bending. So the braking force goes along the length of here, and this locally buckles. That's been counteracted or mitigated with this reinforcing bit of tube here. This is the point where I guess it's a through axle goes through. This is the other end of that through axle. I've not seen this kind of clamping arrangement before, but I guess it may be fairly common on mountain bikes. You've got the gear hanger here, which goes through here, and it's like a slit through there, which clamps the whole thing up. Not sure, what all that's about. I'm not a mountain bike rider. Other thing you can see is down here, these mounts have been faced. A couple of holes here, which I guess are drain holes. This is the top of the bike, so we've got the seat tube here with the seat clamp. Again, that's very neat, and whoever's done this has cleaned up the inside nicely. There's an external tube here, and then the two seat stays get welded onto there. Now, I don't know if that is worth doing that or not. I'm not structurally inept to do that. Because you've got 3 extra joints. I would have thought welding straight directly onto there might be better, but this kind of sweeps round through the corner, so I imagine if you put that into there, you may have too much thermal stress between the two when you weld it, so it may distort it. The thing I noticed with this is when it's measured, this is geometrically very, very accurate, so whoever's done it has obviously thought about it long and hard. This is the head tube, headset area. Again, this has been finished after the welding. It's quite obvious it has been, and it's good that some time has been taken to do that. There's nothing I can really report on there. It's round, it's concentric. If I was going to pick a fault on this bike, and it's me being picky, this is the lower headset bearing area. Now this uses one of these compression type headsets. It's not a chamfered bearing seat. And you can probably just make out that this is not quite concentric. So on this side, it's a bit thinner than it is over here. In the grand scheme of things, it's fairly minor because the rest of this is extremely well welded. I'll show you some pictures of that later on, but again, around here, the welds are very neat. This area has been reinforced. It's a heavily loaded area, so that's reinforced there. It's also reinforced there, I guess, for impact. Right, it is that time of the show again. It is time for PowerPoint. Let us check that pen is working. Pen 15 working. Steel is real and so is corrosion. So there's loads of people in the comments that go, get a steel frame, this is the best thing since sliced bread, it's not made of carbon. Steel does have some problems. So let's begin. By Hambini, aged 5, those stickers are on the way. Right, first bit is the section which I called What the Usual Twats Had to Say. These are my friends over at Bike Radar, and this chap called Tom Marvin. He said, steadfast stability over loose, fast and sketchy trails, excellent climbing manners, great finishing touches to a well-appointed frame. Oh yeah, we're loving this bullshit in this. And then he's put for cons, doesn't initiate turns quite as easily as some bikes on test. What? Anyway, you go through here, is a load of crap about, well, various bits and pieces, but he kind of like misses the point, which we'll come to shortly. This is another one. Who is this one? Rocket Max, blah, blah, blah. And this one, which I actually think is the bike, the Solaris Max. Now, this was written by someone called Logan Watts. Don't know if that's a boy, girl, alternate, not sure. But in here, it's put steel, or she has put steel is surreal, and there's all this stuff about, you know, where they try and get fairly technical. Well, we're going to get technical in this one. I mean, there's not really much in there. Tyre clearance, build kit, all that kind of bollocks. Read it if you want. This is some internal shots of the frame. Now, considering this frame is fairly new, right, I didn't really expect to see this. So inside, this is like the bottom bracket area. You can see scale here. So that's already built up from absolutely nothing. All these little marks around here are, it looks like weld spatter. There's a few other pictures that I'll show you with that in. This, I think, is possibly a dissimilar metal. So I think the stays and the front triangle are of a different material, and when you get the joint between them, corrosion it tends to attack one material over another. So if you have aluminium and steel next to each other, it'll usually go for the aluminium, so it acts like a protective sacrificial anode, cathode, can't remember which. Anode, isn't it? In the case of this, you see what's happening is if you were to draw the bottom bracket and it's the round bit there, and you've got your down tube going that way and your seat tube going that way, and then the stays coming off there, the muck, junk and crap tends to accumulate in this area here, and you can't really get it out, and that's what that is. So it's in there and it's already starting to corrode. You can see the brown stuff there. This is another shot. Again, you can see some weld spatter around here. Now, I'm not sure what this is. The vent holes on the frame are really, really small, so I had to use a different camera to the one I normally use to have a look. Now, I did show this to some of my colleagues and they didn't really know. Now, they thought it possibly was some sort of surface roughness combined with a bit of scale and corrosion of the tube. The thought around that was stuff like this looks like the onset of corrosion, and it's in this like corner void, so it's on the edges, whereas like here, which is the middle of the round section, there's nothing, so we've got accumulated crap here. This is just a shot where it's been taken a bit further away, so the periphery is actually round there. Oops. And I'm not sure what that is, but there's two sections there, so we'll go with that. But again, you can see the corrosion spots already. Right, steel will corrode. in normal scenarios. Now this chart shows corrosion rate, which is that way, and then relative humidity of air. So when you are below 30% relative humidity, which is there, you've basically got a corrosion rate of 0. Now for practical purposes, engineers tend to use 50%. So below that, you've got nothing. But between 50% relative humidity and 100, it isn't, you know, it really does ramp up. But, and this is the big but, that is before the addition of salt, impurities and other things that are likely to make your steel corrode. Now if you take cars as an example, cars in the UK, if you look at the bottom of a car that's just a year old or even 3 years old when it's come up to an MOT, which is like a test to prove roadworthiness if you're not in the UK. The Germans have tough, I don't know what it is in America, but anyway. It's just all like brown, corroded, the exhaust starts to corrode everything. Now I've seen some cars that have come off a boat from New Zealand and from Japan and there's nothing on the bottom of them, and I think it's the salt more than the water per se that corrodes them. But this is a chart which I lifted from weatherandclimate.com, so thank you to them for providing a chart that you can hardly read, but there's 100 and there's 0. And this is the relative humidity for London as an average. So it starts off at 80, and it's basically the minimum relative humidity in London is about 60 year on year across the year. But, and I would say, but the takeaway from that is, first of all, you're always going to be corroding. The second is, locally inside the bike frame, you've got a local environment. So inside the tube, the relative humidity in there is likely to be way higher than the ambient relative humidity, because you get water trapped in there and you can't get it out. So it starts to evaporate locally inside, and then you'll hit 100% relative humidity, or 90% relative humidity, and then you're on a path to pain. Right. I won't really say much about the bottom bracket. I'm going to do a video separately about that. So BSA 30mm, generally speaking, there's going to be some power limit. I mean, there's a power limit on everything, but the power limit on BSA 30 is a bit lower. This bottom bracket style, you will have to have tighter facing tolerances. You could probably get away with being fairly crap on a BSA 24, so Shimano. But not on this. And then if you go into like stronger, heavier riders, you'll need stronger materials. Now, the telling thing is Specialized in Cannondale, who have historically used 30mm axles, are now equipping their bikes with BSA bikes, and at the same time they've kind of ditched 30mm axles and they're using Shimano. This is the rotor crankset that the chap wants to fit. So it is a Rotor Rex 2. To take this apart, and I've already dismantled it to an extent, it's kind of like a two-piece modular construction. So this is the non-drive side crank arm and spindle. This is the drive side, and you've got a tapered set of splines there that goes onto there, and then you screw that in, and that'll bring it up on the tapers. Now the preload on here is set by this collar. It's one of those ones where you undo the little pinch bolt and then rotate it, and then all is good. This combination of a 30mm axle into a BSA bottom bracket does cause some problems. Now, if I show you what it was designed for, this is a BSA bottom bracket, just as is the one I'm about to show you. But this is for a Shimano axle, so a 24mm axle. You can quite clearly see how thick the sidewalls are where the threaded section is. This is the one that is going into the chap's bike. So this one is the one I've engineered, and it's required because the axle is so wide. You haven't got hardly any space for the thread engagement, so you end up having to make it thin. That does cause some technical problems in the sense that you have to sort of, around the corners, you get some serious stress raisers. So In order to fulfill this chap's requirements, this is made out of titanium, and that is what is going to be installed, but it follows the same kind of principle. So this will, as you thread it in, will engage in there and lines it up. It's the same kind of principle as this one. So this Shimano one, or 24mm, goes in and then it aligns through the middle. So you've got very good alignment and therefore low drag. Couple of little quirks to this bottom bracket, well, not really quirks, but what the chap asked for is, because it's for a mountain bike, he's asked for full seals. So that's why these seals are orange, they're end-to-end bearings. Isn't really too much of an issue installing this apart from the spacers. Now this is the rotor manual and it is absolute garbage, it's rubbish. I mean, all you've got to do is look at the axle. It's massive, the frame's tiny, and then all of these little spacers look like they go inside it. So having spent a bit of time thinking about this, you've got the non-drive side, and I think it's the standard HAMBINI spacer that comes with the bottom bracket, which are these things. So they're lipped spacers, they're not flat. That'll go on. You've got an additional spacer there to cope with the boost spacing. And then on the drive side, you've got, again, the lipped spacer that goes against the bearing. And then this spacer, which goes on. And then the whole thing should clamp together. Now, if I've got this wrong, it's not the end of the world. I'm pretty sure the chap can handle the spacing. But it is a bit of a faff with rotor. You will have to do a spot of fiddling. Fortunately, it does come with loads of spacers. So BSA is an anti-clockwise thread on the drive side and a clockwise thread on the non-drive side. So if I just get these started, because it's a very fine pitch, then same thing on the drive side, but anti-clockwise. So just slot it in, turn it like that. Now when it starts to get a little bit tight, and this has been well manufactured, so it's flat. So that one's home, so there's no gap there. And then this one, we can just turn it anti-clockwise. When it gets a little bit tighter, we can put the tool on it. So there's a small gap there, so we'll put the tool onto that. This is the tool that goes on. Now this is actually fits the same as my T47 bottom brackets. So you just slide that on and it is a very good fit. And then you can get a spanner or a wrench or whatever and just turn it until it's tight. You don't need that much torque. Once it's home, it's home. And there we go. So we've got no gap on that side, no gap on that side. All is good. To get this on, what we're going to have to do is put this through the non-drive side, which is this side. So the spacer's already on. I suppose you could grease it if you really wanted to, but it's clean. And now we can put the other side on, which is this side. So I think that's a 67mm BCD or PCD, however you want to call it. And we can screw that on. But before that, we need to put these spacers on. So the lip spacer with a lip that goes in towards the bottom bracket. So that comes with a HAMBINI bottom bracket. And this, which is provided by Rotor. In fact, they provide loads of them. So we'll get that on and then screw this all together. Probably need to let a little bit off the preload. Now, you're supposed to tighten this up to 35 newton meters, but I haven't. It's probably not necessary for a test build, but there's a bit of play in there, which is to be expected. So if we undo the collar, play's gone, and that is free. Now, it's worth noting that Rotor now have increased the diameter of the recess on the bottom of on the back of their cranks, so they'll accept T47 or this large format BSA bottom bracket, and they really, bottom bracket, and they really had to do that because the market is going in that direction. So the preload's sorted, we can just tighten that up, and that's it. So that is free. So it's got full seals in there, so it's nowhere near as loose as one of my racing bottom brackets. And that brings us to the end of this video. I really do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to smash that like button and hit subscribe. And if you didn't, go ream yourself. Overall, this is a very well made frame. It is steel, so it is heavy. Would I buy one? Well, I'm not into mountain bikes, but you know, some people are. There's not really much I can say about it other than